Hi, everybody. I am surprised that I haven't talked about this book before, but going through my playlist, apparently I haven't. So, Anne of Green Gables has been around for a long time. You may be familiar with it from the relatively ish recent series Anne with an E on Netflix. Or maybe you were first introduced to it through the miniseries in the 1980s. Or who knows? Maybe there was a community theater production of an adaptation. I don't remember how old I was when I first read this book. Not this book, but this story. Um, this is a more recent edition than I had when I was growing up. Um, Story of an orphan who goes to live with a spinster couple, a brother and sister who live on a farm in Prince Edward Island in Canada. And this story has meant more to me than many of its contemporaries. Little Women is pretty well known. Some earlier works would be Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, also very popular, or some of the adventure stories like Treasure Island, um, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And it's interesting because I'm not an orphan and I'm not from Canada, but I think there are, of course, some qualities in the main character, Anne, that I definitely relate to. Her love of story, her imagination. I don't think that my imagination caused the preposterous level of shenanigans that she found herself getting into because of that. I like to think that I'm not as prideful as she can be. I definitely have a really high opinion of myself. And I don't think that's the problem. And I am like Anne. One of the problems she encounters is that she is very much a stickler for keeping her word. And so when she tells Gilbert Blythe that she is never ever going to talk to him ever again, she sees through on that pretty well. It takes a long time before she decides that that is a promise that she does not need to keep. Um, I think I'm just more judicious about making promises. I don't make promises on the fly. I'm very, of course, I'm old now, but I don't think that was something that I did as a kid. I didn't wasn't much one for saying something, making any sort of forever promises. That was a no-no. Um, and I do feel things deeply, like Anne very much does. Possibly not quite as deeply. It would be difficult to imagine someone more emotionally fraught. She's not really emotionally fragile, but she feels things very intensely, and that intensity um, causes her to be melodramatic at the very least. I think to some degree, all kids can relate to that because when you're younger, things tend to hit you harder. You don't have the variety of, you don't have as many life experiences as you do when you get older. You have lived longer, you have had more experiences. That's the way it goes. And so by the time you are in your, adulthood, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, you've had more ups and downs. And so the day to day ups and downs, in contrast, don't hit as hard as they used to when you were in the single digits. So there's that. The stakes are just about perfectly set for a kid's book. Um, ridiculous level of hijinks, but at the same time, there is an emotional depth to them. There's a resonance there. I don't want to say gravitas exactly, but you can understand why she feels the way she does. Why, even if you're just like, no, 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 think this through, please. You can understand why she might react the way she does. I think we also really like a protagonist who means well and who, in trying to be helpful, just makes things worse. And because you just want to jump in and be like, no, honey, no, that's not good. Whoops. And you can see it all going wrong as it goes wrong. But the nice thing about it, and what makes it enjoyable rather than miserable, is, first of all, you know it's going to turn out okay. Okay, so that decreases the empathetic suffering. And likewise, it's kind of nice because it's not happening to you. I think William Goldman is the one who said that the difference between me and Indiana Jones, is that Indiana Jones trips and falls into a pit of vipers, and I trip and I fall in a muddy puddle. And so, yes, the pit of vipers is more dangerous, but it's also more exciting. And the muddy puddle is just boring and annoying and doesn't really make for a good story. The stakes aren't high enough. It's just an inconvenience. So this rises above the level of inconvenience, but it's nice because it's not happening to you. So, the relationships come across as authentic. Her bosom friend, Diana, is much more straight-laced. We get a little bit of the relationship between Elizabeth Bennet and her friend Lucy, who marries Mr. Collins and says, this is basically, she says, this is the best I can hope for. But what I like about Anne of Green Gables is that it goes in a different direction. Like, Diana marries someone that Anne considers not exactly beneath her, but definitely a step down from what they would have imagined for themselves. And Diana, I don't remember her diminishing her choice of husband. In fact, I feel like she pushes back against Anne for it. It's been years since I've read it, the original text, other than leafing through it to find just my favorite parts. But she gets hurt that Anne can't just be happy for her, because she's not settling. She's happy with Fred. I think his name's Fred. And Anne does sort of get past it. She doesn't really understand at that point. But the idea of, not marrying the dark, handsome, ridiculously wealthy, but, someone who's a good person and kind and thinks the world of you, that's its own kind of special. I mean, it's what we would call romantic today, someone who thinks the world of you. Whereas, the tall, dashing stranger is very much, I think even, teenagers today see that as immature, let's say, and probably foolish. And sense of passion and romance in the adventurous sense definitely continues with her well into young adulthood. It's tempered very gradually as she ages. We still see little bits of it, and a little bit of her prickliness, even, as an older woman, when her kids are mostly grown up, and she re-encounters Christine, I can't even remember her last name, but she's still a little bit prickly, and she notices that, she's gotten a little thick around the middle, and Anne's just kind of, see, and she's the one, Christine Stewart, and she's the one that Anne thought Gilbert fancied when, was that when they were at university or when they were at Queen's? Anyway, I thought you loved Christine Stewart, and everybody was pairing them up together. And she's like, no, we studied together, and that was all. She was, they were. I think she was interested in somebody else. Christine wasn't even interested in Gilbert at the time. One of the other nice things about it is that it is somewhat episodic. This happens and this happens. Sometimes there's a through line; they kind of interweave. But the moments, the individual like little stories, they're almost self-contained. And so that's one of the nice things about going back to it. I can think, oh, I want to read the part about, where Anne dyes her hair. I want to read the part where Anne has gotten in trouble for intoxicating Diana and has, they are going to have one last farewell to each other, and then they can't ever be friends anymore. And Anne obviously is torn up about this, but she sort of makes her peace with it by having them vow eternal, eternal friendship, even if they can't actually interact. And she, comes up just on the spot with this over the top purple prose vow that their hearts will always be as one. And just the intense theatricality of it is a way for her of coping with what she's going through. Having seen and been involved with this story in so many different variations throughout my life, sometimes it's hard to see which version of the story I'm getting this from. And I think that's part of what makes it special for me, because that's how a lot of my stories work. There's the version that I remember, but I'm not sure if that's my memory or if it's what I'm remembering from family members or friends telling the story, and my brain has kind of filled in the details there. So that I relate to it on that sense, that there's more to it than just what's in the original text. It's it's hefty. This copy of it is 373 pages. That's a lot. But because it is episodic, it lends itself really well to, reading a little bit here at a time. And it's not a hard read. There are, thanks to Anne's prodigious vocabulary, there's definitely some flowery language and some challenging words for younger or resistant readers. People just don't like reading hard stuff, but the context is there. You don't need to know what the fancy words mean. And that's part of what Montgomery comes back to in a number of her books. Another popular series is the Emily books. There's 3 of those. And I don't like those as much. And some of that is ideological. Emily, there's a romance issue, and then not exactly to get back at this one guy, but because she's mad at the guy, her OTP, she's mad at the guy that she really cares for. She ends up accepting the proposal of somebody else. And there's like a kind of an honor thing there. She realizes that she doesn't love him. She doesn't want to marry him, but she's not willing to break off the engagement. And it's not until she realizes that he flat out lied to her about the quality of her work, and which led to her burning the only copy of a manuscript. Um, Once he tells the truth about that, at that point, she doesn't feel guilty about breaking off the engagement. And I can accept that, but a, it's definitely something for which I can't relate to that character in that way. First of all, I can't imagine accepting a proposal and not being like dead sure on going through with it. And second, I can't imagine keeping a proposal when you realize that this is not the person you want to marry. Like, break it off. You're not actually married. Um, and then just the whole idea of burning your only copy of a manuscript. Like, what? No, no. I, if anything, I have too many copies of, different things that I've worked on, lesson plans, ideas for, stories, whatever. Like, I keep it, like I save it, and then I save the because what if you want to go back? It's like reading a choose your own adventure book. Everybody knows you keep your finger when you make the choice, you keep your finger in the choice page, and then you go and you read ahead. And if it's bad, then you can go back and you can choose again. Same sort of idea. You don't. So anyway, yeah, there are a lot of things there that, and just she's just not as good. She's just not as interesting as Anne. Emily's great, but she is much more internal. Great character, but Anne is just exuberant and just emotes openly and freely. And I guess you can tell I can relate more to that. She also loves prodigiously. She feels things deeply. She's open about how she feels. And she loves and she cares about things. And think I think that's also true with Emily, but Anne cares openly. What matters to her matters, and she's not the sort to shut up about it. So yeah, I feel that there as well. And then even more so now, that the relationships that I've developed as an adult. The ease with which she not integrates exactly into Marilla and Matthew's life, but there's no resentment there. My older brother and sister are adopted. And maybe something that helped is that Anne doesn't have younger siblings to contend with who are the biological children of her adoptive parents. But there's been mostly, good to it, but there's definitely been some challenges, that the whole, I don't know that I've ever heard them say it. But you're not really my mom and dad. And the sense that it's not really meant. That loving someone isn't enough. That if there's not a legal relationship, it doesn't really count. It's not something that really comes up in this. Although Anne, one of the one of the early parts is that Anne asks to refer to Marilla as, not Mrs. Cuthbert. Marilla doesn't want her to call Mrs. Cuthbert, just Marilla will do it. She says, "Can I call you Aunt Marilla?" And Marilla says, "I'm not your aunt." We could pretend. And Marilla does not believe in pretending. This causes issues. And Anne says, "It would make me feel like I really belonged to you." So that it doesn't actually change anything about the relationship. It's just a different way of referring to them. But using words to indicate the relationship, to in that name, in that title, that meant something to Anne. But it was something that just kind of they breezed past. And it's, in my experience, it's not something that's just gone. If that's an issue, it comes up repeatedly. But at the same time, part of that's part of the charm is that it sands down some of those prickly edges, to what happens when you grow up and nobody wants you. Or I mean, not even that much. It doesn't take that much. The lack of trauma that we see in Anne is not realistic. But I think that's part of the allure. That all you need is love. Once you find somebody who accepts you for who you are, it takes care of everything. The truth is, it's not that easy. It takes a lot more work than just finding one or two people who accept you no matter what. But at the same time, the hope in that promise that there is somebody who will love you for you, and that it does get better, and that you can heal from trauma. Ultimately, the promise that this story makes, with the right set of circumstances and a whole lot of work, it's not an empty promise. It tells us that we can heal from trauma and that it can get better. And I like that promise. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. If you haven't read Anne of Green Gables, it's free. You can get it from the library. You can pick up a copy fairly inexpensively. If you want a print copy, you can go online. It's probably on Project Gutenberg. I'll see if I can put a link down in the description. Bye for now.